Thanks for tuning into the video. Let's really quickly break down how we've seen the market react to the Trump administration really campaigning to fire a Federal Reserve Board governor, and then what are some of the potentials we think could happen as a result of the campaigning in this particular direction. Now, when Federal Reserve Board governors become appointed, they normally serve around a 14-year term, and I don't think we've seen a Federal Reserve Board governor be taken off the board in the history of the Federal Reserve. I could be incorrect. Somebody could correct me in the comments. Now, we've seen that the Trump administration believes that this particular governor has done something incorrect in a mortgage application. Now, this was before she was a governor, and they believe that gives them cause to fire her. Now, we have not seen the bond market negatively react to this. And a lot of, I would say, analysts or experts believe it's because they feel that at the end of the day, Trump is going to reverse his path in this particular direction. That's the first thing. What we want to ask is, if they set precedent in this particular direction, how do we proceed from here on out? If the market starts to believe that if a administration, not just this administration, but any administration, does not like the policies of a particular Fed governor, or they don't like the policies of a group of Fed governors, they should look to campaign against them to have them removed so they can get the policy that they desire. It can make people, but especially people looking to buy U.S. government debt, perceive the U.S. government differently. This is not a conversation that's going to be had on a lot of the mainstream channels because their audience doesn't really have the ability to understand what I just said. You have to understand is that the U.S. government, they finance their operations through the bond market. If bond yields get to a certain level, because people start to lose faith in the government of the United States just having what we call very stable and reliable operations, it's going to cause a rise in bond yields, which means it's going to become much more expensive to operate government. The administration, the current administration, wants a lowering of the rate because they want operations to become less expensive, right? However, they could take a path to where operations could become 2 to 3 times expensive. It's a little deeper than a lot of the red meat that's been thrown to certain audiences because they don't understand how the bond market functions. And they won't understand it until something goes wrong in the bond market and then it starts to flow through the regular economy. And even then, they may not understand it because they may not be able to make the connections because the average American, they don't really understand that there's something called the bond market in which the United States government gets the actual operations of the government financed through that bond market. They're not even aware of that. They have no idea like that even exists. And I know because at one time I didn't know it existed. So this is something that we want to continue to observe and try to figure out, are they going to continue to pursue this path? Most likely it's going to go to the Supreme Court. They had a hearing Friday. I don't necessarily know what the resolution of that hearing was. The bond market starts to believe that all it takes is for an administration to not like the policy of the Federal Reserve Board. They may reprice what they're willing to pay for bonds. Here's the reason why I think that this could spiral out of control for the current administration. And this is also something that's not going to be talked about again because it depends on the audience that we're talking to, right? There is not a political party that wants to own central bank policy. I'm going to repeat myself again, so I want you to understand what I just said. There is not a political party that wants to own central bank policy. If people feel like a political party has to own central bank policy, if something goes wrong, they now have to come up with a new scapegoat. Right now, the current administration can say things are a certain way because of central bank policy. If they now stack the central bank with their people and things still don't go the way they wanted to go, now they got to find a new scapegoat because they can't use the central bank anymore because why? You got the people under that you said you wanted. It's like a coach getting all the people he wants on the team and the team still don't win. Well, now you got to come up with a new scapegoat because you got your players now. So now it can't be the fact that you don't have your people in position. There is no political party, and we know there's two main political parties inside the United States, that wants to own monetary policy. It benefits them to be able to say that the central bank is an independent organization. It allows people to spin all their conspiracy theories, yada, 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 but it really helps politicians because why? We don't have to own what happens at the central bank. We can blame it on them and we can be separated from it. And so therefore our constituents can't blame us for what's going on. Again, the average person, because they don't have the foundational understanding, may struggle with that concept, right? And that's cool. It takes time to get to that because you have to actually understand the composition of these particular systems. And so it benefits politicians to be able to separate themselves from central bank policy. Therefore, this is another reason why I think this won't really have a lot of legs, because it will tie the Republican Party to central bank policy. Therefore, if things don't work the way they want it to work, now they have to own it, or they have to come up with a new scapegoat. Here's another left field, I would say, scenario that could happen. The bond market could negatively react to what the administration is doing. This could set the stage to have Trump removed by the Republican Party. If the bond market really has a really negative reaction to this scenario, it can set the stage for the Republican Party to come together and say, you know what? We have to create a justification or rationale to move Trump off. Most likely it's going to be health reasons. They're going to say health reasons to move him out, to put Vance in, and then he won't interfere with central banking that way. If bond yields get too high, they can't finance operations of the government. And what we call a high bond yield currently is like 5% on a long-term bond. You go to other countries, it's 15%, it's in the teens. We call 5% high. So that's what I want you to understand, is that there's a lot of different scenarios that could play out if they continue to extend this situation. But it depends, again, on the audience that is going to be assembled. That's going to determine what narrative they're going to give. And so that's something I've seen, and I've kind of on repeat now, to where the narrative around the scenario has very little to do with what is actually going on. It has to do with the ability of the audience to understand what is going on. So if an audience can't actually understand what is really going on, they'll tell them anything and the audience will take to it, because why? They don't know what's going on. You know, we live in a world where people used to think that the sun revolved around the earth because they did not have the ability to understand anything different. So they just believed that. They really believed that the sun revolved around the earth. Like, we live in a world where people believe that. We live in a world where people believe that when there was a full moon, people turned into werewolves. People believed that at one time. So when a person doesn't have the ability to actually understand what is actually going on, they're willing to believe anything about any situation if you can sell them on it, because they're looking for an explanation. So just give them one. So let's see how this plays out. David W. Williams, also known as a retail trader. Talk to you later.